Welcome back. This is assignment 3.5, and we're going to just do our examples directly off of your homework assignment. We're going to take our questions directly from your assignment. So let's look at question 2. Here we have this quadratic equation, 7n squared minus 4n minus 6 equals 0. You can't see the original directions, but here we want to solve using the quadratic formula. And yeah, let's use our quadratic formula. So just like we learned in our last lesson, here we're going to say a is equal to 7, b is equal to negative 4, c is equal to negative 6. And a reminder, here is our quadratic formula from the last lesson. So I'm going to go ahead and start entering all of these values into the formula. And boom, there we go. There is, after I plug all three of these values into the formula, here is what I'm left with. And let's kind of follow the exact same thing we were doing back in assignment 3.4. I highly recommend, as you work these out, I highly recommend you start with the square root first. Specifically, don't even press the square root sign yet. Just do negative 4 squared minus 4 times 7 times negative 6 and hit enter. Okay? This comes out to 184, but remember, I still need to take the square root of that number. Okay? So this all came out to 184. I need to now take the square root of it, and oh boy, here we go. So I don't know if you realize this, but on our last assignment, assignment 3.4, I made all the answers come out nice and relatively neat. Okay? I made sure all of your answers came out as, all of your square roots came out as perfect squares. But see, that doesn't always have to happen. See, it's very possible that you can have an irrational answer when you're using the quadratic formula. So different teachers will have you handle this different ways, but what I'm going to have you do, I'm going to ask you to write your irrational answer out to 4 decimal places. And this will be important to kind of maintain the accuracy of our final answer. If we want our final answer to be accurate, we need to use a lot of decimal places at this point to kind of maintain the accuracy, the precision of our final answer. Okay, so at any rate, when I move to my next step, I'm going to write 13.5647 right here from where I took the square root. Now the rest of this is pretty easy to fill out. The opposite of negative 4 is positive 4. 2 times 7 is 14. And so from this point, I'm going to get 2 distinct answers. My first answer is going to be positive 4 plus 13.5647. All of that divided by 14. And you know what? Let's go ahead and have at it. I know it's a lot of decimal numbers to type in when you get an irrational answer, but that's just kind of how it goes. I'm going to take that divided by 14. Now my first answer, I'm going to use the approximately equal to sign. With an irrational answer, we can't use an equal sign. Okay, we're going to have to round in a case like this, or at least I'm asking you to round is what I'm doing. So I'm going to say, now final answers, you'll notice this was multiple choice. We're going to just round to the nearest thousandth to 3 decimal places. I get 1.255. Now, I'm a little leery to select one of these yet. I don't know. I'm thinking it's probably C, but there's a chance it could be A. I might have had the slightest round-off error when I rounded my decimal. So let's try the other answer to make sure. The other answer is going to be 4 minus 13.5647. All of that divided by 14. Sometimes, here's a little cheat with this calculator. Sometimes I'll hit the up arrow. Just go back to this previous entry, change the plus sign to a minus. Then I'm going to divide that answer by 14. Now this one comes out to negative 0.683. So both of these are solutions. I could plug either one of these numbers in for x, or in this case in for n. It would make it equal to 0. Now there might be a slight round off error because I had to round my answers, but I can see the correct answer is C. Now I want to point something out here. In this case, whatever comes out of your square root, the b squared minus 4ac actually has a name. It's called the discriminant of a quadratic equation. Here, our discriminant, b squared minus 4ac, came out to 184. If your discriminant is a positive but imperfect number, like a positive 184, then you will always get 2. This is what will always make your answers irrational. And it will make it so that both of your answers are irrational. You'll get 2 irrational solutions if this ever happens. See, and compare that to what happened in our last lesson. If both of these were, if this was a positive perfect number, if this number would have been a perfect square root, then my numbers would have came out perfectly to be rational. But in this case, they're imperfect, a positive imperfect number in the discriminant. They're both irrational. All right, let's try one more. Let's look at question 5 then. And question 5, look at your multiple choice answers. You're probably looking at this thinking, what in the world is going on with these answers? All right, well, I'm going to show you. Question 5, starts out normal enough. We have our A value of 2, our B value of 1, our C value of 2. Starts out normal enough. And as always, I'm going to encourage you to really start by focusing on this square root. Okay, so we can plug an answer in right here. So let's do this. 1 squared. And again, I would, to start, I wouldn't even use the square root sign to start. I would focus on this 1 squared minus 4 times 2 times 2. Interesting. This time it came out to a negative. Now remember, I still need to square root this. But here it's called my discriminant, came out to a negative number, a negative 15. Watch what happens when you try to square root a negative 15. We talked about this earlier in lesson, in assignment 3.1. When you try to square root a negative number, you get an error. It's because it's called imaginary. And the way we actually are going to write this is I radical 15. Okay? This square root of negative 15 is imaginary. And since square root of 15 doesn't really reduce, I guess technically you could write it as a decimal. You could write like, let's see what the square root of 15 is. Technically you could write like a 3.87 3i. That's how some teachers would have you do it, is write it like this. But in this case, since radical 15 doesn't come out perfectly at all, it's irrational, I'm going to have you just do this. I'm just going to have you write the radical 15 with an I in front of it. That's a very standard way to handle an imaginary number that comes out so messy. All right, now let's fill out the rest of this. This is the opposite of 1. That's just a negative 1. On the bottom here, I have 2 times 2. That is 4. Now, the good news about imaginary numbers is there's actually no way to simplify this. This is as simple as your solution can get. And so I'm actually done at that point. There's no breaking it down further. I guess technically, if you really wanted to, you could write negative 1 plus I radical 15 divided by 4. And negative 1 minus I radical 15 all divided by 4. You could break your solutions down like this, but this I makes it impossible to evaluate any further on your calculator. So at this point, you're actually done. You can see clearly the answer is going to be D. Now, big takeaway from this. We talked earlier about your discriminant. B squared minus 4ac. It's called the discriminant of your quadratic equation. If your discriminant is negative, like negative 15, if you ever have a negative discriminant, you will always get 2 imaginary solutions. That will happen every time, where not only will one of these be imaginary, but actually both of them will. Okay. And I just want to throw kind of one more unique situation out there that can happen from time to time. Here's a quadratic equation that I was asked to solve, and I did so using quadratic formula. Look at what happens in this case. In some cases, when you use the quadratic formula, this discriminant, the b squared minus 4ac, everything inside the square root, comes out to equal 0. It's rare, but it happens from time to time that your square root would end up being a 0 And yeah, you would put a 0 right here into your formula. You would take the square root of 0 and get 0. This is called having a discriminant equal to 0. And something really unique happens in this case. If this number is 0, then it doesn't matter if you do a 6 plus 0 divided by 2 or a 6 minus 0 divided by 2. If your discriminant is 0, then you're going to actually get the same answer twice, no matter what the rest of the equation looks like. Here, we're going to end up with the same answer twice. If you ever have a discriminant of 0, that always turns out where you will get what's called one double a solution. A double solution means you get the same answer twice. So technically, you'd still say this has two answers. The solutions are 3 and 3, but since the same number repeats, it's called a double solution. Okay, so I hope that helps you on your assignment. Best of luck to you. Bye.